In modern aviation, pilots are not really considered as pilots as they mostly have to manage their computers and autopilot system. However, sometimes they can rely too much on their autopilot system. This exact thing happened in 2008 when an Airbus A330 somehow grew a mind of its own and decided it wanted to end all the lives on board. No one died that day, but the experience left once happy lives in tragedy. Today, I'm gonna tell you a story of what happens if a plane goes erratic. This is the story of QF-72. October 7, 2008. An Airbus A330 was cruising smoothly over the Indian Ocean. At 37,000 feet, the plane was flying from Singapore to Perth, Australia. On board with 303 passengers and 12 crew members, it was routine. The captain was Kevin Sullivan. He was an ex-fighter pilot in the US Navy. He got a job at Qantas as it was his childhood dream of being a pilot. The first officer was Peter Lipset. He is one of the most experienced first officer in Qantas. It's now 1 p.m. and the flight attendants were done with serving lunch. They now had time to rest. The captain has came back from his rest break and is ready to take over. But in just 13 seconds, things start to go wrong. At first, one of their autopilot systems seemed to have disengaged. An autopilot system disengaging does not bring down a plane at once, so the captain turns on their second autopilot system. Suddenly, a massive caution warning then bears. They got many warnings that made no sense. Stall and overspeed? Yeah, I doubt that. It's almost the same as Aeroperu 603. However, the flight computers on Aeroperu 603 went erratic after it just took off. But for Qantas 72, the plane was already 3 hours into their flight. And just 13 seconds later, it happens. Nosing down at a rapid rate, the plane loses G-forces and lifts passengers who are not strapped in onto the ceiling of the plane. They were dropping rapidly, so the captain had to pull up the plane. But the plane was not responding. The first officer tries to pull his controls, but struggles as well. The captain, which is a proud ex-fighter pilot, he is not letting a erratic computer beat him. Instead of pulling up, he lets his controls go. It works, and the plane comes back up. Normally, this is only fit for fighter jets, but for some reason, it worked on an Airbus A330. Everyone who was launched to the roof fell flat down onto the floor. Many passengers were bleeding and injured badly. The pilots don't have time to think. Flight attendants strap everyone into their seats. First officer contacts air traffic control to the nearest airport where they can land. Another fear in the cockpit is that when descending, the plane will drop again. It almost happens again, but the captain stabilizes the plane. The pilots were manually flying for the duration of the descent. They made it down safely. Pictures taken showed the damage in the cabin. The passengers who were launched hit the ceiling hard and fast that the plastic broke off. The captain was so emotional, he quit his job as a pilot just a few months later. None of the 303 passengers died that day, but many were left traumatized and scared. The most serious ones were from one of the flight attendants who tried to take his own life, and a 17-year-old girl was left with PTSD. She refuses to fly till this day. Investigators were trying to break down what happened on board Qantas's worst accident. They came to the conclusion that there was a faulty sensor reading that day, but unclear how the sensors malfunctioned. The final report of the investigation said it was a computer error and the pilots were not to blame. If the computers were working normally that day, the passengers would have lived happily for the rest of their lives.